Did you hear about the Occupy Wall Street reunion that will occur on September 17th in D.C.? Few have heard about it, and details are sketchy, but it's planned to go for 50 days, which is until Election Day in November. We'll look at what's planned and try to place some perspective around this siege, as they call it, in this episode of Analysis Behind the News, where we provide the perspective that you can use to restore American liberty and independence. 9 years ago, the Occupy Wall Street movement was created as a campaign by Adbusters magazine, which is a media foundation founded by two longtime environmental extremists. As the New York Times wrote in a December 22, 2012 article, Adbusters gave Occupy its name and opening date and designed the poster with Occupy's defining image, an elegant ballerina perched atop Wall Street's raging bull, while gas mask figures loomed in the background. The poster contained this text: "What is our one demand? Occupy Wall Street, September 17th, bring tent." A digital version went viral. Mr. Lassen's main role in the Zuccotti Park occupation, however, pretty much ended there. He remained in Vancouver, never visiting the Lower Manhattan encampment and participating in the local organizational work that made it possible. Mr. Lassen is Cal Lassen, a near 80-year-old Estonian-Canadian filmmaker who produced documentaries for PBS and Canada's National Film Board for 20 years, as well as creating and operating a very successful market research company who lives in Vancouver. He told the New York Times, "Until Occupy, the greatest political movement I'd ever seen was the uprising of '68. It really inspired me, and I've been running on that energy and have been trying to recapture it ever since." The Times reported that last year he did recapture that. Stirred by the uprisings in Algeria, Tunisia, and Egypt, the Arab Spring, he and colleagues at Adbusters began to consider the possibilities of achieving a soft regime change in the United States, of finding some way to tap into the revolutionary zeitgeist. Out of those discussions came the idea of Occupy Wall Street. In mid-August of this year, Adbusters wrote a tactical briefing for its White House siege campaign and stated, "We will lay siege to the White House, and we will sustain it for exactly 50 days. This is the hashtag White House siege." A siege only works if it is sustained. We witnessed this, the multiplying power of a strategic occupation 9 years ago. You dig in, hold your ground, and the tension accumulates, amplifies, goes global. 50 days, September 17th to November 3rd. All of this is supposed to be kicked off in Lafayette Square next to the White House. So if the goal of Occupy Wall Street was to be a soft regime change in the United States, then what do you think the goal of White House siege is supposed to be? According to Adbusters, a massive collective action of the sweetest kind of disobedience, of which it says will draw wind from Me Too, BLM, Extinction Rebellion, and protest against Trump's lethal bungling of coronavirus. In their own words, will inspire a global movement of systemic change, a global spring, a cultural heave towards a true world order. Seeds for a cultural revolution have long been planted in this country. A new world order has always been the goal of opposition to God, order, liberty, and freedom. Globalists have been the current tool building the infrastructure for world government. Yet, just an occupation alone in D.C. won't have as much impact as it would if there were many occupations in many locations across America. In fact, that's suggested by Adbusters in Tactical Briefing 3, which states, "Together, we can organize pop-up sieges at federal buildings in dozens of cities, maybe even launch a national art project to decorate the streets with stunning visual memes. And we could make sure that activists turn up in Washington, D.C. in ever-increasing numbers as the election approaches. Lafayette Square may be cordoned off and military police will doubtless be there in full force. But what can they do if hundreds of thousands of us turn up all over the nation's capital day after day and start playing totally nonviolent improvisational jazz, much like we did in Zuccotti Park 9 years ago? White House siege has an ominous ring to it, but it could turn out to be the most beautiful, festive, and effective uprising that America has seen since the Revolution. Ladies and gentlemen, the War for Independence was no festive art fair, obviously. Let's not demean the actions of our founders one iota, but let Adbusters' statement take much more gravitas than perhaps even they let on. The New York Times article also included a quote from someone who had studied Adbusters for years, who said, "Adbusters has called for many big campaigns that never really happened." As we know, for something to happen, there must be organization. In fact, the article mentioned that on-the-ground activists building an organization through many, many meetings and relationships and hard work in New York and elsewhere wasn't the work of Adbusters, but others. In an interesting tweet promoting the event, Adbusters tries to dismiss the notion of any cabal working together by stating, "On September 17th, we occupy Lafayette Square for 50 days and hold vigil for democracy. It's time we stand up. There's no deep state. There's no conspiracy. It is simply the 1% in office abusing their power. Bring a tent." What will actually happen is anyone's guess. The left-leaning Daily Beast says the protest may never actually amount to much, yet it points to examples in what it calls right-wing media of coverage that describe a siege by Antifa to occupy the White House to displace the president, especially if he doesn't step down after a Joe Biden win. The Daily Beast concluded with, while the siege has been promoted as non-violent, Lassen also wouldn't rule out the possibility of at least property destruction. There is going to be a violent fringe, and my own feeling has always been that I don't like any violence against human beings, and I'm 100% against any of that stuff, and I condemn it with all the guts that I have, he said. But when it comes to violence against property, I'm not so sure that I'm 100% against that. As we have seen during this summer of death and destruction, neither are the rioters that have descended on America's streets. The hard-left communists from Revcom and Antifa have helped to fill the streets for Black Lives Matter. So why would we think the White House siege would be any different? As was mentioned during our internal Monday morning issues meeting, highly organized movements can have the ability to bring in large numbers of people on both sides of the issue. Those willing to destroy property are now being faced with those who don't, disgusted Americans who have had enough. Both sides of this explosive issue confronting each other could certainly have deadly consequences. Yet those may be the results that the deep state wants to see occur, so it creates a situation of uncertainty that the federal government would have to clean up, and then throw into the mix the chaos of an election that may not be decided for weeks. The year 2020 serves as a wake-up call for the average American, seeing what government is capable of, as well as that of the protester-turned-rioter, has shaken many Americans into great concern for the future of their country. To fight organization, we use organization. The John Birch Society fights the opposition through education, particularly by exposing the plans of our opponents and demonstrating what those plans entail for American freedom. September 17th is also Constitution Day. If you're serious about protecting our constitutional republic, then apply for membership at the John Birch Society today. You can be plugged into local membership and be part of a movement that will help you every step of the way. Apply today at jbs.org and then get others to do so as well. Who do you know that cares about freedom and independence? It's time to act. I'm Bill Hahn for the John Birch Society, and until next time, stay informed, stay active, and stay safe, Patriots.